What is going on, everybody? Nick here. A few years back, I scaled a content writing company to $92K a month with 16 staff members. Then I scaled an automation business to $72K a month with 2 staff members. And now I run a blended automation and info product business that does over $100K a month solo. So naturally, I've learned quite a bit about how to scale a business without necessarily adding to the headcount. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to give you guys a simple 4-step framework you can use to scale any digital business without having to hire more people. In this video, you're going to learn about revenue ceilings and how to maximize revenue per staff member. You're going to learn about productization, including how to break down any deliverable into components and my personal approach for that. I'm going to teach you automation, how to use machines to do your work instead of people. Then we're going to talk a little bit about distribution, or how to multiply your reach per unit time invested. And lastly, I'm going to run you through a few scalable business models, including how to pick ones that naturally let you grow without adding headcount. If that sounds interesting to you guys, stay tuned and let's get into it. All right, a couple things I'm going to show you in this video. I have a couple diagrams. I have a slideshow. I'm going to walk you through it step by step. But just before I get into it, I have to add my usual disclaimer. This is just what's worked for me. I'm not necessarily trying to prescribe anything for you. If I was a discerning viewer of the Nick Sarayev cornucopia of YouTube content, I would take whatever makes sense to me and then discard the rest. I'm not going to do any gatekeeping. I'm just going to show you everything that you need in order to do the same shit that I did. So how to scale your business without adding staff. I put $100K a month here just because it's clickbait, but let's get into it. So first and foremost, everybody thinks that you need to hire to grow. But my secret sauce is that you don't. The reason why is because we are quickly entering an era where if you properly configure your tools and your business infrastructure, those alone can do the work of dozens of people without you needing to hire anyone. So you can absolutely scale your company without adding headcount, or by adding a very minimal amount of headcount. In this video, we're going to cover that 4-step framework that shows you how to do it. I'm going to cover a revenue ceiling or revenue per staff member first, and then I'm going to get into how exactly to go about establishing this framework and then carrying it out. But this is the same framework that is currently being used by thousands of people, myself included, to build high margin, high revenue solo businesses. Usually in the past, you kind of had to pick one, right? Either you were high revenue or you were low revenue, high margin. Well, now you can have both, and there's no reason why not. So this applies to any digital business. If you're running a physical business, it's a little bit more limited, obviously, because I don't know, if you're some HVAC guy, it's going to be difficult to carry out the step-by-step process that I'm laying out in this video. I'm not necessarily saying that if you run a physical services business or a physical product business that you can't implement these. I think you certainly can. You're just going to have a harder time doing it, and it's going to be a little bit less effective. A concept that I want to cover just before we get into things is that software and artificial intelligence, you can kind of treat these as force multipliers. These are very similar if you guys think back to, I don't know if you guys learned this in high school, I guess it depends on where you are, but the force multipliers in engineering, like a lever, right? A lever is a force multiplier, or a screw is a force multiplier. A wheel is in essence, some type of leverage. Well, software and AI do the same thing, except instead of it being in the physical world, it's kind of in the virtual world. And essentially, they allow one person to provide the output of many people. So your goal in scaling your business and implementing what I'm about to show you is to increase the ceiling revenue that a single person can manage. What I mean by that is if a single person currently in your business can manage maybe $5,000 or so, if you implement the tips I'm going to show you, we'll be able to get that higher to maybe $25,000, $30,000, $50,000, $100,000. In addition, hiring people includes many hidden costs and risks that usually aren't talked about, right? You have tons of issues with hiring, especially if you're looking to hire employees, like onshore employees, and especially if you are in places where legislation just makes that really difficult, right? I don't want to be super evil capitalist or anything like that, but I'm sure most of the people watching this are business owners. So, I'm sure y'all feel me when you have to deal with certain probationary periods. Sometimes you have to deal with unions. You have to deal with termination pay. You have to do onboarding. There's a certain number of sick days you have to take. You have to give to staff members. Obviously, you have some base compensation rules and whatnot. Well, the really cool thing is software and machines, they don't require any of that shit, and neither does your business infrastructure. So there's near zero onboarding costs, there's near zero training costs, there's near zero legal costs, right? Aside from clicking a terms and service button and maybe some, I don't know, very unlikely disastrous things that occur with data. Realistically, you don't have to deal with 99.9% of the bullshit you have to deal with when hiring people. And that's my inspiration behind this. That's the inspiration behind the framework and why I'm running my business the way that I am. And then my last point is, even if you do eventually have to hire, why not just set your business up in such a way that enables you to scale as much as you can before you do so that when somebody eventually does come in, well, guess what? Now, you don't have to hire 20 people. You can just hire one, right? You can pay a lot less money. That person is hyper leveraged. You can do way more with it. This is more or less my mindset. And the reason why I'm telling you this at the beginning of the video is just so that we're all on the same page here. I don't want anybody being like, Nick, what the hell? Why wouldn't you hire people? Why would you get a machine to do the work? Well, this is why right here. Okay, so the very first and probably the most important concept that we have to learn in order for the rest of this to make sense is the revenue per staff member. I've talked about this before in my videos, and I've called this revenue per employee, or RPE. This is a pretty standard metric in like business analysis. Basically, these analysts and these consultants come in, and then they count up your total revenue for the year usually, and then the total number of employees at your company, and then they just divide the total revenue, say $1 million, by the total number of employees, which is, 100, and then they figure out the the revenue per staff member, which is $10,000. $10,000 per year per staff member is shit. And if your company is, an RPE of that, then obviously you're doing something wrong. Unless you're at like some, startup and you're not making any money, but you're fundraising or whatnot. But I'm assuming none of you guys run startups here. I'm assuming we're all just like bootstrapping agencies or service businesses. So I'm taking this one step further and I'm calling this the revenue per staff member just because this reflects, I think, a little bit better the modern hiring environment. We're not all hiring employees anymore. We hire contractors. Sometimes we hire like flex workers. Sometimes we have VAs and stuff like that. This is just a more comprehensive term that I'm just taking to mean like the total number of people in your business that you interact with on a regular basis. The revenue of your company divided by the total number of people that you interact with on a regular basis. Now, if you're a solopreneur like me, you can also think of this as how much economic value alone can I create, right, with just myself before I add anybody else to my business. And this is important for me because I'm always trying to optimize this. And this is where systems and tools, artificial intelligence, and the software approaches I'm going to talk about in a minute get into. This is typically the way that most businesses work. Like most people will begin service businesses organically, right? Let's say you start like doing some design. You're a great designer. You've worked at a bunch of other agencies or something. You're like, you know what? I don't get paid enough for this goddamn company. I'm going to branch out on my own and I'm going to become my own designer and make way more money. So you're a specialist, right? Naturally, you're going to do the vast majority of the work yourself because that's sort of like your key value prop. It's like, hey, I'm amazing at this and I'm going to deal with you personally and I'm going to take care of it fast. I'm going to have low turnaround times, right? This is sort of like the way that a freelancer starts becoming an agency and scales. So eventually you hit a point where you're juggling so much that you get diminishing returns on any additional time that you spend. So naturally, you see a bunch of business gurus talking about this shit all the time. They're like, hire, delegate. You're like, all right, cool. Well, why don't I delegate my work then? That's kind of the next step that I have to take in order to grow. Now, if you think about it, up until this point, the amount of money that a single specialist can handle in a company is, and this is a very high estimate here, but maybe it's $15,000 or $20,000 per month. Like if you got your shit together, you already understand some of these systems, you lay out your work in like an efficient way. Maybe at the high end, you can make like 15 grand, 20 grand a month. And that's with like great products, great services. And that's also with you working yourself like a dog. This is the definition of working for yourself, being self-employed. You're doing a ton arduously and you're working some incredible hours. So you're at 15, let's just say you're at $20,000 a month, just for simplicity's purpose. Okay. But then you hire somebody and maybe you hire like some designer or something like help you out with some work. Well, now what you've done is you've taken your revenue per staff member, which was previously, that $15,000 to $20,000, and you've divided it by 2. Okay. So now your RPS is half. Now, the reason why you hired is logically you were like, well, I can only do $15,000 or $20,000 of work myself. So maybe if I hire somebody else, I'll be able to do $30,000 or $40,000 of work, right? But the unfortunate thing is you are rarely able to scale to twice your size by hiring twice as many people. And I'd go as far as to say that's almost like a rule of service businesses. With every individual person you add, and I'm going to show you guys this in a second, but with every individual person you add, your revenue per staff member tends to go down. And there are a couple of reasons for that. So, think about it. You scale your agency and now you're making $60,000 a month, right? You got 5 hires, you got a couple designers, maybe you have some marketing guy to help you out. Maybe you have a salesperson and, maybe a few more people than you. And you might be making $60,000 a month, but just do the math. At $60,000 a month, if you divide that by the total number of people working in your company, well, now the revenue per staff member has gone down from, what it was before, let's say 15 or 20K to $12,000, which is, that's almost like half the RPS, right? So the goal here is obviously to maximize our RPS. What's the solution to do it and how can you do so? And I have sort of like a 2-pronged approach. The first is systems and the second is software. And both systems and software, if laid out intelligently, will allow you to increase your revenue ceiling. And then you as an individual, before you get to the point where you're thinking of hiring, right? Instead of you hitting that cap of 15, 20K a month, You're making good money, but you're being worked like a dog. Maybe you can make $30,000 or $40,000 a month. And then maybe instead of you being worked like a dog, you can work at half capacity. If I'm being honest, this is what the vast majority of people that are probably watching my content right now want. You want to have a super high income without necessarily having to compromise on your lifestyle too much. But you also want to be good at what you do, and you want to be able to provide like a great service, right? You want to be able to provide security for your family. You want to be able to, I don't know, get the latest Apple Watch or whatever the hell. But you don't necessarily want to do so strung out with 20 employees that you're managing, under an incredible amount of stress. So, the solopreneur lifestyle for me is super high ROI personally. And, I've implemented systems that I'm about to show you that have enabled me to do this. Okay. So just before we proceed, let me just let me just show you what the, I guess, relationship looks like between the size of an agency and then your revenue per staff member, generally speaking. So let's pretend that you are starting at the start line here. Your revenue per staff member is pretty high, okay? You are, I don't know, can I draw on this puppy? Oh, hell yeah, I can draw on this puppy. I don't like how this automatically turns into a circle though. All right, whatever. Anyway, so at the very top here, your revenue per staff member is pretty big, right? The second that you make that first hire, it starts plummeting. The reason why it starts plummeting is, well, now that you have another person, you can't contain all of the work in your head anymore. There's some information that you know that your staff member doesn't know. And so you need to communicate that. Well, guess what? Any time spent communicating is time spent not doing the thing. And so you start accumulating communication costs. That's number one. Number two, because of these communication costs and because of miscommunications, you substantially increase the number of mistakes that you're making. Okay. You're no longer, like the sole service professional. This person might not know everything that you know, right? So now you have some mistakes in place. In addition, one thing that I didn't mention here was you also have to do training, right? If you want this person to learn your process as well as you know it, or be able to replicate it to some reasonable percentage, maybe 80%, well, you need to train them. And any time spent training them is time not spent doing the work, right? So in addition to that, you have like some groupthink in larger companies. Larger companies tend to be able to make less ideal decisions simply because of a human bias known as groupthink, where we tend to agree with decisions for appearance more so than for correctness. And then, there are also some social issues. Sometimes Betty at the front desk hates Stephanie in the back or some shit, or Tom is angry at Jerry. Anyway, the point that I'm making is every single additional staff member you hire, you're going to have some issues, right? And your RPS is going to go down because a smaller fraction of the total time of every single person and total mental effort is going to be spent actually delivering the service that provides you money. So I say that it sort of plateaus here. Well, that's just because, the marginal additional person at an agency size of, I don't know, like 100 plus, the effect on your RPS becomes really, really small, but I don't know, maybe it still goes down just a tiny bit. And you can imagine this sort of just proceeding for infinity. So I show that to you just so you understand the factors at play here, and so you understand why we should get away from hiring people being our first solution to, constraint issues. And we should focus instead on this 4-step framework. Now, I'm going to start us off with step number 1, which is productizing what you can, and then noting what you can't. We're going to take the stuff that you can't, we're going to move it to the next step. I've added some revenue ceiling estimates here. These are totally rough. I mean, these are just based off of my experience in agencies. I've worked with obviously several dozen, well, I guess now over 1,000 agencies if you count all my communities. So I tend to know what the revenue ceilings of agencies are sort of intuitively. I'm saying $20,000 to $30,000 a month per person if you productize your operations effectively. And I also, I'm going to provide a quick example of businesses that I think have done a really good job of this. And the business here that I'm going to talk about is Fat Joe. So these guys are like an SEO platform. They provide tons of services. I mean, if we just go down here, you guys will see link building, digital PR, SEO, content writing, design and video, blogger outreach, PR campaigns, niche edits. I'm friends with the founder, and essentially, the reason I bring this up is because these guys have done a fantastic job at building a business around this principle that I'm about to talk about, which is productization. If you want, link building services or SEO services from them, they know in advance exactly what margin, exactly what percentage they're going to make on this. They have checklists over checklists of every step involved in that link building process. And they could basically, at this point, hand off that job to a monkey. And it's so granular and so step by step that monkey would still probably do a pretty reasonable job. I'm not saying their staff members are monkeys or anything. I'm just saying that they're very, very good at designing the infrastructure behind a productized business. So productization if I just zoom out a little bit, it's just breaking down what your business does into concrete deliverables. Okay. Deliverables are what the customer or client sees, not necessarily what goes into it, but just like the actual end result. And then what you do is you take these deliverables, then you break those deliverables a little bit further down into the steps needed to produce them. And then once you have those steps, then you can break them further down into little checklist items. Once you have those checklist items, you can break them further down into inputs and outputs. So here's a quick example of how you might productize a simple marketing services company. Okay. Let's say you run a run-of-the-mill marketing agency. You provide PDFs. I don't know. You provide like PPC campaigns. You provide like marketing general, like a local marketing services. You provide some type of like SEO. Anyway, what you do is you take those services and you break them down into specific deliverables. What is it exactly that the customer is getting? They're getting a certain number of links probably, right? Just as the Fat Joe example showed a minute ago. You're probably giving them some reports. You're probably giving them maybe like a website you're spinning up for them. Maybe you're giving them some PPC campaigns in their Google Ads Manager, right? Basically, take all of the services that you're providing and then break them down into their specific deliverables, the products that the customer is basically buying from you. Now, once you have these deliverables, deconstruct each deliverable into its components. Quick example here is, let's say PPC campaign is one of your deliverables. This is in one of your packages that you sell. Well, if you think about it logically, like what is a PPC campaign? A PPC campaign is where you take ad copy and then ad creative, and then you upload it to, I don't know, Google Ads Manager or something like that. That's typically like that's the component that goes into the service that you're providing, right? So if we just try and get a microscope and we zoom way in on that product, what goes into it are, let's say, 3 ad creatives and 3 ad copy variants, hypothetically, right? However many ad creatives or ad copy variants they are. What you do is you repeat this process until you have all of the parts of the entire service suite that you're providing. So if you think about it, your ad copy, right? That deliverable or that component might have a couple components in and of itself. Maybe ad copy is composed of a headline and then it's composed of some body text, right? And each of these may have some character limits. So if you're doing Google, maybe it's different than Facebook, right? You have to get very granular here in order to productize properly. But the point is, you are deconstructing what makes your business or your service tick. Once you've defined all of these explicitly, what you do is you create a step-by-step guide or an SOP, standard operating procedure, on how you would define or how you would deliver this thing, assuming that you had no knowledge, assuming that you were basically just starting at the very start line. The reason why you do it this way, well, it's twofold. I'll talk about one of the reasons why, which is because you can start automating it. But the reason why you do it this way is by assuming zero knowledge, you start thinking and explicitly defining all the knowledge that goes into this thing. And the second that you know that, you basically lay out all the resources that you need to automate, to delegate more effectively, to basically turn this whole thing on autopilot. Now, is there something that you can't productize? Because sometimes there are things that you can't productize. If something does require an incredible amount of know-how, if it's some deep business consultation or something like that, if it requires a laborious number of personal hours, sometimes you can't actually productize a service, and that's okay. All I want you to do is just make a note of what that is, and then move on to the next step. So if you're watching this right now, I want you to get as much value out of what I'm talking about as humanly possible. So if you run a business, I highly encourage you to actually pause the video and at least just give it 30 seconds to a minute of thought. Run through the services that you're providing in your company and just say, okay, so I do provide 3 or 4 services. How do I break those down into deliverables? Well, I guess I provide, SEO services. So that includes link building, and then that includes some marketing report, and then that includes some website CRO. Well, what do each of those include? I just want you to do this thought experiment because it's going to make this next step a lot more valuable. If you don't yet run an agency or anything like that, that's okay. We can just move on right away. But just keep this in mind as you are designing your products or services. It's going to make the rest of your life really easy. I wish I did this with my first couple of agencies. I would have crushed it and I would have had to spend way less time and energy in it. So step 2 is we have all of those productizable, steps, right? And then we have a couple of things that we can't. Step 2 is, well, now we can automate all of those things that have those step-by-step guides and that are very clearly definable and that you can do with zero knowledge. And the things that we can't, we're going to optimize. Productization by itself is already massive leverage, but if you automate steps within the product, and you don't have to automate all of it, you can just automate specific steps, right? Like in our ad copy example, which I'm going to talk about. Maybe you can't automate the creative because your creative is just a little too high quality for machines right now, but you can certainly automate your ad copy, right? The only reason why you know that you can do that is because you've since broken everything down into very specific deliverables. But now, if you think about it, if ad copy is half the work, ad creative's half the work, you've just automated half of that project, right? You've essentially doubled the leverage. You've doubled the revenue per employee or revenue per staff member by automating 50% of that deliverable. So I talk here about a revenue ceiling. At this point, I'm saying it's about $50,000 to $100,000 per month per person. A good example of this is DesignJoy. Now, DesignJoy doesn't just automate everything. I mean, this is an actual designer, but the way that he automates things, and I think Brett makes like 100 to 140K a month, so probably a little bit more money than I do. And he's a total solopreneur as well. The way that he does things is his automation is templates. So he has a massive library of, I imagine, hundreds of high quality templates of every conceivable variation. And when a client makes a request for a new design, he thinks to himself, what template is closest to what the client wants? I've already spent all the time and effort building these templates. Their design is really clean. The spacing is perfect. I don't have to like reinvent the freaking wheel here. So let me just pick something that's really close. Then he picks a really, really high quality template. And the thing about this templating feature is the template is 80% of the way there, right? So that means that the distance that Brett has to travel between 80% and 100%, that's just 20%. If you think about it, 100% divided by 20%, that's 5x leverage. So he just increased his revenue or his revenue per staff or his leverage by 5 times by using templates. So you don't necessarily have to automate things in the traditional term. I know a lot of my viewers are probably automation agencies or automation freelancers, but understanding the principles here, which is just leverage, goes a long way. So anywho, this is Brett's business. As I mentioned, he does a ton of money and the guy's pretty funny to follow on Twitter. Although I think recently he's gotten into some spats, which I may have had to temporarily mute him for, but you can make a fair amount of money and your revenue ceiling can be pretty high if you follow what I'm about to show you. So here's another example of how to automate the productized marketing services that we just generated in the previous step. Number one is we're going to take all the step-by-step guides you created before. And the next thing is we're just going to ask ourselves, can a machine do 80% or more of this if properly instructed? My rule is 80% or more. I never try to do 100% because realistically, machines can very rarely do 100% of your job right now. They're quickly getting to the point where they can do 100% of small little things, and eventually we'll piece those small little things together and get the big thing. But right now, 80% is sufficient for me. And it's personally what I use to make, over 100K per month. So if it's good enough to make 100K per month, you want to make 100K per month, then odds are it's probably good enough for you. Now, if you're like most digital businesses, the answer is yes, you can do a ton at that 80% mark. Using our ad example, you can totally automate the production of copy. You can totally automate the production of headlines, of body text. You can automate the production of creatives at this point super easily, whether it's through templating features or whether it's through, like you have Midjourney or something spit out some beautiful looking, sexy, cool gradient that's branded, right? Or maybe some assets. Maybe you create your own vectors or SVGs or something. The technology exists to do literally everything that I'm talking about here. There might be somebody that's watching this video right now that runs a marketing agency that thinks, wait a second, I could automate literally 100% of this, and then takes this and then uses it to build a productized service and then starts making $1 million a month within a few months. Like the technology here is entirely at the point where you can automate the vast majority of it. Now, it's also possible that, maybe you run a different service or something that's just a little bit more involved. Maybe because you're doing link building, part of link building involves the creation of a bunch of personal connections, and maybe you need to have somebody managing your inbox or something. And even if you use AI to draft up the responses, there still technically needs to be a person there or whatever. That's fine. And that's why we want 80% rather than 100%. Maybe instead of doing the whole thing, they just pre-draft your messaging, or maybe they do like an RD, like a rough draft of your creative, or maybe they send the first 2 or 3 emails in a sequence to your warm network every time you get a new link building opportunity that you want to, rank somebody on. All of this stuff is still leverage. The point that I'm making is just ask yourself, how much time can I save if I construct the service a little bit differently than what I'm doing right now? If I look at all of these services with a fine-toothed comb, if I peer through every single one, how much further and how much more efficiently can I get? And that's really what this step is for. And if a step is not automatable, then just ask yourself how you might optimize it. Like for instance, I provide consultations. And my consultations can be anywhere from like 15 minutes all the way up to an hour or so. Now, I have been trying to reconstruct my consultations to take me less time and to be a lot more amenable for my customers and my clients because, my calendar's starting to fill up. Things are getting a little bit tougher, I think, on both ends. So I've started asking myself, is there a way that I could reconstruct my consultations? The other day, I found a guy called Christoph Huerman, I don't know how to say his name, who has a completely new take on consultations. And I think this is a very good way for me to illustrate how even if you can't fully automate something, you can streamline the hell out of it. What this guy does is, he's some advanced tax professional who I found when I was looking for some tax consulting on my own. What he does is he gives people consultations through voice messages. What you do is you book a consultation via one of these purchase buttons. Then you send this guy, Christoph, a message on Telegram, and then you send him all of your questions in writing. You can ask questions about all of these. And the idea is, if you really need help but don't have the financial resources to book a consultation for 2,000 euros or something, you can get 80% of the value there with his voice message package where he just reads your question and then answers it for you via some sort of voicemail. So, this is a great example of a semi-productized service. Obviously, it still takes Christoph's time to take the phone and say it. But think about all the problems that he eliminates here. He completely eliminates time synchronicity, like having to be at the same time, calling a person, both of you guys having to be there. I mean, he could go downstairs and walk to his car while answering a voice message and make 500 euros, right? In I don't know how many minutes, probably 5 or 10 minutes. The leverage on this is crazy. Sure, this is still requiring his time, but how much more time does it require to actually sit down and have that full hour-long consultation versus what he's doing here? Now, I should note that he also provides full hour-long consultations, but these voice message packages with, extended voice message package for $800, ultimate voice message package for $997, and so on and so forth. These are novel takes on something that a lot of people just think that you cannot productize. Well, it turns out you can. So I want you to take an approach similar to what Christoph Uhrmann did here, where he asked himself, I'm suffering from these problems. This service that I'm providing makes me money, but isn't really scalable. How could I improve my revenue per staff member if I'm doing this solo? Right. What if I do messengers? Maybe then I can 5x my leverage and then I can make 5 times more. And instead of me being stuck at 20 to 30K a month, now I can go between 50 to 100K per month. All right, the third step that I'm going to talk about here is building automated distribution systems. And to me, this is the step that I'm currently on. I've followed all of these steps myself, right? I productized, then I automated. Now I'm sort of building automated distribution steps myself, and then eventually I'll do that fourth one as well. But for me, this is hyper relevant because this is what I'm doing. And it's also one of the highest leverage things that you can do. Just look at the revenue multiples here, right? I think a single person can easily get to 100 to 250K per month. A good example of the person that's doing this right now is Justin Welsh. He is leveraging the hell out of automated distribution systems. If you don't know what that means, I'll cover it in a sec. In order to sell, I think he runs like a $2 million, maybe a $3 or $4 million a year business now, completely solo. So I think it's somewhere around the 250K a month mark. Another example is obviously me with my automated 2 of me on the screen simultaneously. That's a little too much. Another good example, this is me with like my automated distribution through my YouTube and so on and so forth. So the value in automated distribution systems is, like, if you don't know what distribution is, just take a step back. Distribution is your ability to put your product or service in front of other people. So in a modern digital business, if you want to scale your distribution without necessarily adding staff, that means one of two things. The first is outreach systems. So like automated cold outreach, where you distribute to hundreds of thousands of people per day with seemingly customized messages without having to individually go through, look the person up, send them an email, right? The value in this is whether you connect with 100 or 10,000 people, your time investment is going to be the same. This is sort of option one, and this is something that I talk about a lot on my channel. But if you think about it, a few months ago when I started my YouTube in earnest, I started posting all the time. What I was really doing was I was doing number 2, which is where I was creating content like YouTube videos, SEO articles, and that sort of thing that do the same thing that cold outreach does. It's just they allow me to do it completely on autopilot, which in my opinion is a little bit higher leverage now. So you kind of have 2 choices here. You can do content systems or you could do outreach. The point is though, any automated distribution system has value because the amount of time it takes to connect to one person or 1,000 people is approximately the same. Like if I made this video and I've just been shouting to the void for the last half an hour or something like that, and a single person saw it, it would not take me any additional time if instead I had gone viral and 10 million people had saw it, right? My inputs are the same. The outputs are completely variable and they can scale infinitely until all 8 billion people, stare me deep in the eyes and listen to me yap. So yeah, the point that I'm making is if you really want to grow substantially bigger than probably what most people would consider a high income, which is somewhere between like $30,000 to maybe $50,000 a month. If you want to grow even bigger than that, you basically have to make use of automated distribution systems of some kind. Those automated distribution systems might also be stuff like ads, right? I mean, I talk here about content, but you can also think of this like advertising. The downside of that is, although it is an automated distribution system, you obviously have to make some arbitrage or margin on the people that click through your ad and then convert to your offer versus the amount of money you're paying per click. But you can think of it that way as well. Same sort of idea with cold outreach, right? You are paying a certain amount for the mailboxes, you're paying a certain amount for the leads. The idea is, arbitraging. Organic content is a little bit different because a lot of the time your investment is not necessarily money. It's more so just the time and the know-how. That's what I've chosen to do here. But you can easily scale to $100,000 to $250,000 per month per person. And I firmly believe that like the next solopreneur wave here or the next wave really in business. We had indie hacking for a little while. We had like build in public. Is going to be a solopreneur wave of people making over 6-figure monthly revenues through approaches like what I've talked about here. It's going to be people that have productized their businesses like I have, people that have automated what they can and optimized what they haven't been able to, and then people that build automated distribution systems that sort of just sell for them, while they sleep. Like I will wake up a lot of the time to like Stripe notifications saying people have purchased my product or service. You're very unlikely to get that without some sort of automated outreach system or some sort of content or advertising funnel. All right, so this next step here, I'm keeping purposefully vague because I have yet to get there and I don't consult with many people at this level myself, but it's purposefully picking a scalable business model. I know that you're probably thinking, Nick, why the hell are you putting this at the end as opposed to at the beginning? And the reason why is because don't put the cart before the horse, if that makes sense. Don't, forget what you're doing this for. Odds are if you want to run a business and you're watching my content to help you do so, you're doing it because you don't want to build the next Uber or necessarily fire up the next rocket ship, SpaceX competitor to get to Uranus or something. I could have picked Mars. I picked Uranus. You want a sufficient amount of security. You want to be able to enjoy various luxuries of life. You want not to have to worry about like various inflation numbers or world events or anything like that. And so if you started by picking a scalable business model, the likelihood that you actually hit that level of wealth is a lot lower than if you pick something like a service agency, simply because there's a trade-off all the time. And I think this is a good opportunity for me to whip open the whimsical. The trade-off is basically, if this is our little thing, scalability and short-term revenue are both at odds. So if you pick a business model that allows you to scale very big, it will likely be more difficult for you to make short-term revenue as a result. Let me reconstruct this and make this sideways instead. And then let's put short-term revenue over here and then scalability over here. And let's just look at some candidate business models, okay? One candidate business model that maximizes your short-term revenue might be what we're doing here, like freelancing. Agencies is another one, right? Probably somewhere right around here. Some type of like B2B managed service. As we scale, obviously things change a little bit. From B2B managed service, maybe go to like B2B high-touch SaaS. Maybe after B2B high-touch SaaS, we go like low-touch SaaS. And then maybe, all the way on the right-hand side, we have some sort of like, actually, I think low-touch SaaS and InfoProduct are probably pretty similar. Maybe InfoProduct's actually a little bit lower than low-touch SaaS. So this is where like I don't know. And then finally, actually, let me do one more. We'll do sort of like PaaS. That stands for Platform as a Service. This is like basically Uber and whatnot. So, if I just move this around so that it's a little bit prettier, you can see on the left-hand side here, if all you want to do is you want to make money today and you want to make $10,000 as quickly as humanly possible, starting with the next Uber is not going to help you accomplish that mission. Why? Because if you want to build a platform, obviously you need to invest a ton of time, energy, and infrastructure. You got to hire engineers, or you have to be a fantastic engineer. You have to build something of worth. You have to build distribution channels. You have to have distribution channels. You're not making a ton of money per deal. I mean, even with like Uber, what are the margins on a single deal? If I try and take an Uber to downtown, how much is Uber really profiting from that? Probably a few bucks, right? Versus, let's say, a freelance deal where you can sign like a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 deal, like literally in your first day freelancing. If you play your cards right. So same thing with agencies, right? one of the reasons why I came into freelancing and agencies is because they are the fastest way to get short-term revenue. And then if you think about it logically, right? If I were to take a freelancing or agency outfit, and then if I were to productize it, automate it, optimize it, automate the distribution of it, I basically now have like leveraged agency. And a leveraged agency, I would wager, has all of the benefits of the short-term revenue on the left-hand side, but also a lot of the benefits of the scalability of like the high-touch SaaS, info products, low-touch SaaS, and platforms as a service. So, as you go to the right of this graph, you make less money up front, and then you make more money total. Now, the reason why that's important is because, you kind of have to know what you want. If you wanted to start that rocket company or something like that, well, you sort of have to accept the fact that you're probably not going to be making a lot of money in the short term. So I guess this is my long ass justification for why I put this thing last. I didn't really need to do that, but whatever. So if you've exhausted everything in this list and you're still not happy with your revenue ceiling, let's say you've been doing this for a few years and you're making like $100,000 a month as a solopreneur, similar level to me, and you're like, shit, I'm still not really happy with how much money I'm making. There are certain business models that inherently let you scale further. The con is that they take way more in the way of resources set up, and if you miscalibrate, you can waste it all. How many horror stories have you heard of the next big thing that's completely tanked and lost investors hundreds of millions of dollars? They're the Silicon Valley graveyard. That's the trade-off, right? Scalability versus short-term revenue. So I have some examples here of scalable things. Information products tend to be scalable. Software products tend to be scalable. Affiliate advertising is one thing that I didn't really touch on. That tends to be scalable as well. Although you do have to know what you're doing and you do have to be open to some level of risk. Typically, if you're doing affiliate, you're either organically ranking pages on Google or some other search engine and then having some percentage of the revenue that you generate per lead, or you are creating some type of paid advertising that refers somebody to a funnel, or maybe you make the funnel yourself. And then, your whole gambit is, okay, like, is the amount of money I spent to acquire one new customer times whatever the small percentages that I get, is that is that less than the amount of money that I made off of that deal, essentially? So, these are purposefully scalable business models that, people pick when like they're trying to, disrupt an industry or whatnot. But I put these here at the end just because that is sort of the next step. If you get to maybe $250,000 a month per person, $300,000 a month per person, and you start plateauing and you're like, well, shit, I need to hire. If you are dead set on being a solopreneur, you can absolutely start a business, either solo or with a founder, that makes substantially more money than that. I forget exactly how much money. I think it was Tinder, the dating app that had like 9 software engineers or something. And I think they had like over $1 billion valuation. Like if you think about the leverage on each of those people, that's a ton, right? And that's really what I'm getting at here with these scalable business models. So in short, we have 4 main concepts that I want you guys to think deeply about. We have the revenue ceiling, but then we have thinking about your business in terms of economic productivity. You have productizing, you have automating, and then you have distributing. And at the end there, assuming that you're unhappy with being able to make $250,000 per month per person with extraordinarily high margins, you lunatic, then you also have the ability to pivot and pick a more scalable business model. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But if you want to do that, I'd highly encourage you guys to at least get your bag first. All right, hope you guys appreciated the video. I had a lot of fun putting it together. If anybody has any questions about scaling their own business, how to do so without adding headcount, just leave a comment down below. I'm more than happy to get back to you. If you guys have any ideas for future videos or any questions about any of the content that I've created so far, then please let me know. I want to help and I want to engage with all y'all. Otherwise, if you could do me a big solid, if you haven't subscribed to my channel already and you're still here, odds are you probably like it or you hate me so much you're just waiting for me to screw up. That's fine too. Subscribe to my channel, like the video for the algo, and I'll catch all y'all in the next one. Thank you very much and have a lovely rest of the day.